Hello everyone, International Rations here again, and today I have a French individual reheatable combat ration. This one is for 24 hours and it's the menu number 3. It expires on the 29th of June 2025, so it's still very fresh. This particular menu says that it is without pork, however I'm not sure if that would be acceptable for Muslim or Jewish troops since it's not halal or kosher. However, it does seem to be Middle Eastern inspired or something similar to that, since the main courses are tuna in coconut milk and something called a poultry tabbouleh to eat cold. So it looks like a really interesting ration. I'm going to go ahead and get right into this. Unfortunately, the footage for opening the ration itself was lost. However, I do have a couple of pictures of how the ration looks when it's just laid out. So I'm going to go ahead and throw those up and then we'll get right on to breakfast. Here we are. I went ahead and selected breakfast. I'm going to go ahead with the muesli, these sardines, this tea, which is a mint tea, a green mint tea, these packets of coffee, the cheese, along with some of these biscuits, and last but not least, this Mocha Combat Fuel bar. Let's go ahead and prepare the tea and coffee first. Pretty strong mint smell. Next up, the coffee. Says for each of these 150 to 200 milliliters of water. So I have somewhere around 400 in here. Interestingly, there's no kind of creamer or anything like that included. So if you don't like drinking it black, then you're kind of out of luck. However, they do include sugar, so you can always add that. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and try this. I quite like it. It tastes exactly like a coffee. I would say it tastes just like a normal kind of pour over or brewed coffee or something like that. Just a regular black coffee. There's no tricks. It doesn't have a huge freeze-dried taste. You can maybe tell a little bit that it is a freeze-dried coffee and not completely fresh. But overall, it's really good. I think it's high quality, and there's really not much of a freeze-dried taste there at all. And they certainly give you plenty of coffee, as you can see. I probably could have used just one packet, and that would have been more than enough. Alright, without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into these biscuits. I think I'll have these biscuits cereal for breakfast. Which, by the way, if you couldn't really see, there's 6 salted biscuits, 4 cereal biscuits, and 6 chocolate biscuits. Alright, here we go. We have the cereal biscuits. And since they come in packs of 2s, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 8 packs of 2s, so I'm going to go ahead and grab 2 packs. We have some cereal and some salted biscuits. I'm going to say a quick prayer and then we'll get right into this. Okay, here we go. I really like the flavor of those biscuits, and they're definitely some of the better ones I've had. I mean, these are 1,000 times better than an MRE cracker, which, no hate for MRE crackers, they're honestly not bad, but these are amazing, honestly. They have a really great flavor, just the slightest hint of a sweetness. It's like a slightly sweet biscuit that has a bit of a wheat and fruit taste to it. As I mentioned, it's very hard to explain, but it is one of the best biscuits I've ever had. Next up, let's go ahead and try these salted biscuits. I like those as well. There's not as much of a flavor to them. They really are just a regular old salted biscuit. They do taste good. They taste pretty high quality. And they're definitely more made for a base for other flavors than to be a flavor of their own. So I'm going to go ahead and open up this processed cheese next, and we'll try a little bit of this along with the cracker. Here we go. The fabrication date is right there, and this is almost 3 years old, but it's still well within its expiration date. Okay, here we go. It has an imprint of the lid on it. It doesn't smell very strongly, but it does smell like cheese. It has kind of like a Swiss look to it, but I really don't know yet what kind of flavor it is. It's very soft. I quite like it. It has a very sharp flavor. I would assume that this is some kind of a cheddar cheese or something like that. It tastes pretty similar to a sharp cheddar we have here, but it's definitely a little bit different. And I'm sure that's due to it not only being French, but also being a processed cheese. Despite it being canned for about 3 years, it's still one of the better cheddar cheeses that I've had. And it is probably a lot better than you would expect a canned cheese to be. I'm going to go ahead and try it with the salted biscuit, and I think this is going to be really good. The sharp flavor of the cheese really takes over this more less flavored biscuit, and the biscuit adds a really nice texture to it. And yeah, it's a really good combination. I really like how you get a lot of that cheese flavor, and along with a little bit of this cracker flavor and a lot of the nice texture and crunch that it has. It's honestly really good. And honestly, if you were served these on a fancy platter instead of in a can and in a package respectively, you really wouldn't complain about these at all at a restaurant. If someone told you, hey, here's some fancy French food, these are some biscuits and cheese from some fancy region in France, yeah, I would believe them, honestly. It's quite good. And I would say, honestly, it is restaurant grade. That is just an excellent combination, and I will definitely be finishing it. But right now, let's go ahead and keep moving and try this Bar de Céréales et Cacao Aromatise au Café Gout Mocha. So something about a chocolate mocha cereal bar. Sounds pretty good to me. It's quite small. Here's my palm. It's that big. Let's go ahead and break it open. Let's go ahead and try this. I really like that. This one, everything so far has honestly been really good, and this is no exception. It has a really nice texture with those kind of like Rice Krispie bits that it has in it, those cereal pieces. And it has a really nice chocolate flavor with a little hint of coffee as well. It tastes fresh. It's definitely not spoiled or anything like that. It tastes like it's been manufactured yesterday. I'm going to go ahead and go in for another bite. And there is really just no complaining about that at all. It's just a really good cereal bar. Great flavor, great texture. The only thing is that it is pretty small, but we do have plenty of stuff for breakfast and a lot more to come, so I don't think that's really a problem. It's just a really nice snack, and I'm going to go ahead and finish this up. I'm going to go ahead and prepare this chocolate muesli next. Next up, while we wait for that muesli to finish being prepared, let's go ahead and try some of this mint tea. It's a pretty regular mint tea. It has a very gentle flavor to it. It's not a really super flavorful mint that you really taste. It's much more of a kind of toned down mint flavor, which mint has never been my favorite flavor, so I don't mind. If you do really like a mint flavor though, you'd probably be a little disappointed. Of course, you could probably put it in less water and that would get a little bit more of a flavorful tea. But for me personally, I really don't mind the more less pronounced flavor, and I honestly think it's pretty good. Although if I were to choose to only have either the tea or the coffee, I would definitely choose the coffee. Not only am I an American and a coffee drinker, I also just think that the coffee is just a little bit better quality and more flavorful than the tea. But there's certainly nothing wrong with the tea, and if you're a tea drinker, you would probably prefer that. Let's move on to these fillets de sardines. I'm not really sure if this is a common breakfast item, but while I was figuring out what kind of meals what I would eat for each meal. I kind of had this left over, so I figured it would be perfect for breakfast. Just to go ahead and add a little bit of protein and stuff like that. Alright, there we go. There was a little bit of a splatter with the olive oil, but it's very viscous, so not much. I'm going to go ahead and just try this plain. I believe it's most common to eat sardines cold, which is what I've always done in the past, but I think sometimes you do heat them up, especially if you go ahead and put them in a meal. But I'm going to go ahead and probably eat these cold. I quite like those. They have a pretty strong flavor, but it's not overly fishy. The olive oil, I think, is a really good preservative and a good base for this. It really lets the fish kind of take on their own flavors and just kind of soak that in a little bit, rather than the sauce overpowering the flavor of the fish. They look very good, and they do taste high quality to me. They're certainly perfectly fresh, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with them. It's just a nice, somewhat mild flavor. Like I said, it's not too fishy. I would say it tastes a little bit like tuna, but with the olive oil, it adds a bit of a different flavor to the fish. They're just really pleasant. They're not super in your face or anything like that. I don't know the perfect way to phrase it, but they're really good, and they're just kind of a more toned down and down to earth flavor. I'm going to go ahead and grab a salted biscuit. And try a little bit of this sardine on the salted biscuit. That is amazing. Wow. This combination is even better than having the biscuit with the cheese. The textures and the flavor just go together absolutely perfectly. I'm going to go ahead and get another bite in here. Let's go ahead and put plenty of these sardine fillets on top. That combination is so good that I honestly have to open up another package of crackers here. I really just cannot eat those sardines without the crackers. It's just that good of a combination. Now that I'm done with that, I'm going to go ahead and check this muesli, and I really have to say, so far it's really keeping up with its reputation of being kind of a gourmet ration, which you would kind of expect from France, but it's honestly been a lot better than I expected. This muesli looks ready to me, so I'm going to go ahead and dump this out. I have to say, it does look quite good. Without any further ado, I'm just going to go ahead and get right into this. And that's pretty good. It has a nice chocolate flavor to it. It just kind of tastes like a chocolate oatmeal, which is essentially what the American equivalent of this would be. I definitely think it's a good choice to prepare this hot. I don't think it would be quite as good cold. I'm sure it would still be pretty good, but I think hot is definitely the way to go. I'm going to go ahead and try a little bit of this with our cereal biscuit. And I quite like that. It adds a really nice crunch to it. It also adds a really nice kind of sweet, slightly fruity flavor to it. And it's honestly just a really nice combination in my opinion. But that does it for breakfast. It has been really good. I'll see you at lunch, and hopefully it is just as good. Okay, here we are for lunch. I'm going to go ahead and prepare this isotonic fast intense hydration mixed drink first. This one is the mangue, or mango tea flavor. Has that isotonic beverage smell to it. This glass is about 500 milliliters, so I'm going to fill it almost full. I'm going to let that sit for a little bit while it tries to finish dissolving the rest of the powder. I'm going to go ahead next and try this bar de cereals. This is an apricot cereal bar. I'm going to go ahead and set this down, say a quick prayer, and then I'll get right into that. Alright, here we go. Looks pretty similar to the mocha bar I had earlier as far as size goes. It also has the same cereal texture to it. Let's break apart. Very sticky. Let's go ahead and try this. I would say it's quite a bit denser than the mocha bar. I think it has a bit more of the kind of gelatin or whatever is the substance holding it together. It has a very light apricot flavor and it's not that sweet. It's a very nice, pleasant, more mild bar. I'm going to go ahead and try another bite. And yeah, it just has a nice, pleasant flavor and a nice, pleasant texture as well. It's nothing too incredible. It's a pretty regular cereal bar. I do appreciate how the flavor is a little bit toned down and not a super artificial apricot flavor. It's just really nice and pleasant, and it doesn't have any kind of like really aggressive or artificial flavoring. So next up is the tea, and it looks like it's dissolved about 99% of the powder, and that's probably as good as it will get. So without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and try it. It has a bit of a strange flavor to it. It's somewhat reminiscent of a mango tea, but it definitely tastes off, which I would assume is due to it being a powdered form. I've had powdered tea before. Most of the time, it just seems you can't really nail that flavor. I did have one powdered cold tea that was really good in the Slovenian ration, but most of the times it's just kind of a kind of uncanny taste and rather strange one. And while this isn't hard to drink or anything like that, it's not quite the refreshing, fresh tasting, natural tasting kind of mango tea that you would hope it is. It's not too bad, it's just not a really great flavor, and it's kind of off-putting how it tastes a little bit similar to tea, but not quite like tea. It's a hard thing to describe, and if you've had a powdered tea before, you probably know what I'm talking about. They're just kind of strange and not really that good. Honestly, as much as I do like cold teas, and mango tea especially, I would prefer just a regular isotonic drink because this just tastes a little bit off. But like I said, it's perfectly drinkable. It's not that bad. And you should at least hopefully get the electrolytes and sugars you need for your day. I'm going to go ahead and prepare the hot tea. This is a black tea. I'm going to go ahead next and prepare this soup. This is a soup minestrone, and it says to go ahead and mix with 250 milliliters of water. The instructions actually mention pouring the water first, which is usually opposite of what you do, but I'll go ahead and follow the instructions and see how it turns out. It's got quite a bit of larger floating chunks and vegetables. I'm going to leave that for just a little bit, so hopefully some of these vegetables on the top can rehydrate a little bit. I think the soup is probably ready to try. I can't quite remember what minestrone is supposed to be, but I think it's maybe some kind of a beef stock stew. I'm also not sure what those little round things on the top are, but they look like they might be some kind of very small sort of a noodle type of deal. But without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and try this. First impressions are that it's not too bad, but it does definitely taste like a soup that you got out of a powder. I'm going to go ahead and try another bite here. After a couple bites, I would say it's a fairly pleasant soup. It's definitely not the best soup that I had in my life, but it's honestly not too bad, and for being a powdered soup, I'd say it's pretty good. Plus, it's the middle of winter where I live, so it's pretty nice to have a nice warm soup, especially considering that the main course is to be consumed cold. So no huge complaints, but it's definitely not what I would expect to get at a restaurant, probably just due to it being a powdered soup. The black tea looks like it's ready to try, so without any ado, let's go ahead and see if this is any good. It's a pretty regular and plain black tea, nothing too special. I fairly recently had one from a ration from Kazakhstan, and all honesty, I probably do prefer that one. But it is a black tea. There's not really a huge difference. It's just pretty much a regular old black tea. So there's really nothing too much to complain about. And of course, if you want to cut the kind of more bitter flavor, there's always the sugar there. to go ahead and do that. But overall, a pretty regular tea, and there's nothing too disappointing about it. I'm going to go ahead and finish up the soup, and then we can get to the main course. So for the main course, we have a 300 gram poultry tabbouleh, or tabbouleh, something like that. I don't exactly know what it is, and I certainly can't say I've ever had it before, so this should be an interesting experience. Let's go ahead, open it up, and see what's inside. Let's get a fairly sized piece of chicken, as well as some of this other stuff, which is perhaps rice or couscous. I'm not exactly sure. Here's how it looks. It looks pretty good. It looks interesting. It's something that I would think you'd eat hot, but the instructions are cold, so without any further ado, let's go ahead and see if this is any good. It doesn't have a very intense flavor, and I don't think it's been seasoned very heavily. Eating it cold is certainly a bit strange, but it's not too bad. It's not really as strange as just eating regular chicken cold or anything like that, or like a cold steak. It does kind of taste like you're supposed to eat it cold, although I do think heating it would be an option as well. I'm going to go ahead and go in for another bite. And the chicken and what I believe is couscous right here is quite well cooked, but it is also very plain. There's little sprigs of some kind of green in there, along with what might be tomatoes or something like that. But there's not really enough to have a huge impact on the flavor. I'm going to go ahead and try some of this with some salt and pepper, so I'm going to go grab that and I'll be right back. Okay, here we go. We have our Iberico salt and pepper. Let's go ahead, open up what I would assume to be pepper first. That certainly looks like pepper. Not very much in these little pouches, although they do give you 2 of each. It is quite a bit of salt, but I'll mix it up and see how it tastes. Okay, here we go. Definitely tasting that salt, and in my opinion, I think it tastes a lot better salted. Not really getting much of the pepper though, and there really wasn't much in that packet, so there's not really much of a pepper flavor to it. But I do think just the salt alone really does improve the flavor of this. And at least to my taste, I would say this brings the meal up from like a 5 or 6 to at least a 7. Somehow the salt really just tastes right with it being a cold dish, and it's honestly just a huge improvement in my opinion. So I went ahead and finished up with the main course, and it was pretty good, but it does get a bit monotonous even with the added salt. However, maybe that's the preferred way to prepare it wherever it's from, and maybe they just don't do a lot of spices and herbs on their food. I really don't know. But for me personally, I would have preferred to see a little bit more spices, herbs, and flavors. But like I said, it wasn't bad at all, and the ingredients did taste quite high quality and well prepared. It was just a little bit monotonous, especially after you've been eating it for a couple of minutes. But next up, we're going to try this nougat aux fruits. I believe this is the manufacturer right here, and it says something about being traditional. I can't really read the rest of it. But here are the ingredients. It says fruits 25%, which is pineapple, papayas, which is quite exotic, at least for the US, and then raisins. There's also honey, egg whites, wafer paper, and vanilla flavoring, as well as over here, sugar and glucose syrup. So while the ingredients aren't the most healthy for you, there's really not that many preservatives or added ingredients or anything like that, which is interesting to see, especially for something that has to last quite a few years. But without any further ado, let's go ahead and try this. Alright, here we go. That is a very unique look that it has. As you can see, it has entire pieces of fruit just kind of implanted inside of it. And around that, it has this interesting white base. There's even a little bit of texturing from, I would assume, whatever kind of like press cut that in half or something like that. I don't know for sure, but it is very interesting. I don't even know what this is. I would assume it's some kind of mix of gelatin and sugar because those were two of the highest ingredients on the list, which means there's the most in there. But without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and try this. I'll break it apart first. And it has a very interesting little texture there, the way it pulls apart. And that is just extremely unique. I really can't recall ever having anything like this before. I guess the white part is nougat, and it tastes like sugar. I'm going kind of off the ingredients here that I saw, but I believe it's a mixture of sugar, egg whites, and like some kind of syrup or something like that to hold it together. It's very unique. It's kind of like a sort of airy, sugary texture, like a more firm kind of version of a whipped cream, or better yet, more of a, I forget what the exact name for it is, but it's like an egg white bake. It's a sweet pastry that has kind of like a hard egg white shell on it. This is very similar to that. It's really good. It's very sweet. The flavoring is really nice. I like the fruit. It just has whole, natural fruit in it. It's just very unique, very flavorful. The nougat gives it a really powerful and a really pleasant sweetness to it. And the whole fruit just has little bursts of flavor. It's honestly a really good combination and just not something I can recall having before. Very unique, and honestly I kind of wish they had this in the US. Okay, let's go ahead and get on to these chocolate biscuits. I must say that nougat bar was really refreshing and a really nice burst of flavor after finishing up that main course. I believe it's pronounced tabbouleh just by looking at it, but I really have no idea. It was just really nice, very pleasant, and just a really nice small dessert, especially after what was a bit more monotonous of a main course than I would prefer. But let's go ahead and get on to our second dessert item. This is a chocolate biscuit. It looks like it even has little bits of chocolate in it. So without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and try this. That is really good. I would say it tastes most like brownie brittle. The texture is a lot different. The brownie brittle is much crispier and has a really brittle texture. It is brownie brittle after all. This texture is a little bit different, but the flavor is slightly different, but it's very similar. Well, they didn't include any kind of like a pound cake or pudding or anything like that. This honestly really qualifies as a really good dessert in my opinion. Between this and the nougat bar, you're really not missing having a cake or pudding. You still have a really nice sweet way to end off your meal. These also take absolutely no preparation, and you can just go ahead, open them, and eat them. They're a pretty unique item. I don't think I've seen chocolate biscuits in a ration yet. They're definitely more of a European thing. You wouldn't typically see them here in the US. But they're really good, and if you ever have a chance to try any, I would definitely recommend it. It's been a really delicious ration, and there's been plenty of food and plenty of nutrition. And I can't wait for supper. I'll see you then. Alright, here we go. I have supper right here. We have 2 packs of chocolate biscuits, one of the cereal biscuits, our tuna and coconut milk. We have our hot chocolate here. I believe that's what it is. I actually haven't translated it, but I just assumed it is hot chocolate. It says cacao right there. We have this pâté de fruits. Looks like raspberries or something like that right there. We have a little bar of chocolate, as well as some Andros jam for our biscuits over here. And this particular one is a plum jam. I'm going to get this started heating up, and then I'm going to go ahead and try some of this jam along with the biscuits. Alright, here we go. Let's go ahead and see if this is any good. You might notice that as soon as you pull off that tab, there's a perfectly sized little nozzle right there, which is something that's really cool about these Andros jam packets. I assume the color would be a little bit darker, but let's go ahead and try this plum jam. It's very sweet and it's very tart. It reminds me a little bit of cranberry, but mixed in with something a little bit perhaps sweeter, like almost like a cranberry with honey. It's a very unique flavor. I'm going to try a little bit more. And yeah, that actually tastes a lot like honey to me. It's a very unique flavor. I really like it. I'm going to go ahead and try some on this jam here. And it's quite good. It's a really nice combination. Andros always seems to make pretty high quality and really tasty jams. And it's honestly really good. There's just not much complaining about this. Let's set that aside for now and go ahead and try this pâté de fruits. It's very interesting, just kind of like a block of some kind of dried fruit. I'm not 100% sure what that fruit is. It definitely could be raspberries, but it might be something else as well. The texture is about what you would expect by looking at it. It's a sort of compressed, like dried fruit along with the gelatin. It has a nice bit of sweetness to it, but it's also fairly sour as well. Overall, it's a pretty unique kind of flavor, and not like something I've had in the past. And once again, I'm really not sure what fruit it is. It could be raspberries, but it definitely could be something else. But either way, it's a pretty nice bar. Now I have some very hot water for our cocoa. The instructions said about 150 to 200 milliliters of water, so that's about 175. Not really a huge cup of hot cocoa, but they do give you plenty of other hot drinks like coffee and tea. Being French hot chocolate, I have fairly high expectations, so I'm going to go ahead and try this and see if it's any good. It's quite good, especially for being a hot chocolate made from water and a powder. It doesn't top the best hot chocolate I've ever had out of ration, which would be the Dutch hot chocolate, which was absolutely magnificent. However, this is still pretty good. I would definitely still say it's better than like a generic powdered hot chocolate that you get off the shelf. There's definitely some kind of milk powder in there or like powdered creamer. And it doesn't taste just like hot water and chocolate powder. Definitely a step above just regular powdered hot chocolate, but I really don't know if anything could top that Dutch hot chocolate I had a while back. I think the tuna in coconut milk is ready, so I'm going to go ahead and try not to burn myself while I open it. It looks quite a bit different than what I was expecting from the title of tuna and coconut milk. It does have some pieces of what looks like tuna, and I would assume the prevailing kind of sauce here is tuna or is coconut milk. But it also has plenty of other things like carrots and of course rice. I kind of assumed that when it said tuna and coconut milk, it would literally just be a bunch of tuna floating in a bunch of coconut milk. But this is definitely more of like an all-encompassing dish with plenty of rice, so plenty of carbohydrates there, as well as more protein with the tuna. But without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and say a quick prayer and get right into this. Here we go. Certainly can't say I've had tuna in coconut milk before, so this is probably going to be pretty exciting and pretty different. The tuna is well cooked, as is the rice. Both are quite tender and soft and moist. Once again though, I would say it definitely could benefit from the use of a little bit of seasoning and spices. I'm going to go ahead and go in for another bite here. I do quite like the tuna. They're nice big chunks and they taste pretty good. I don't think there's anyone who really couldn't eat this on account of taste, but with that being said, it is also pretty bland. So while it's not like there's a really strong flavor that someone might dislike, there's also not really a strong flavor that someone might like. It's a very neutral dish, which would be great for adding spices if you had any on you, However, in the ration, they only give us a little bit of salt and pepper. I'm going to go ahead and add those right now. And while the textures and flavor profiles are quite a bit different, I would say as far as overall taste and kind of how good I think this meal is, it would be about equivalent with lunch so far. Definitely nothing wrong with it, but also not a really strong flavor profile to it. Just a very neutral dish that wouldn't offend anyone's palate, but that does come at the cost of being a more bold and flavorful meal. But I'm going to go ahead and try this with the salt and pepper. And once again, the salt and pepper really does improve the flavor. I think this would also be really good with some kind of biscuits. Unfortunately, all I have left are chocolate, and I really don't think that would go well at all. And as I usually say whenever I encounter some slightly more bland food, it's not necessarily a bad thing that it's bland for a military ration, because especially when it's a more Mediterranean or kind of Middle Eastern or something like that cuisine, if it's something that's really different that you don't like, then that's kind of worse than just eating something that's slightly bland. And if it is bland, you can of course add salt and pepper, and that does pick it up quite a bit. I'm going to go ahead and finish this up, then we can get into our chocolate bar. I went ahead and finished up that main course, and although it was a bit bland, the salt and pepper really had a great effect. I tasted the pepper a bit more than I did for lunch, and the salt was a nice addition as well. Perhaps bland is a bit harsh of a term. You could also just say that it's more down to earth, or tastes a bit more like a regular old home cooked meal and it's nothing fancy. I definitely do think that it could have benefited from some seasoning, but I also understand that if you use seasoning, not everyone will like that kind of seasoning. But without any further ado, let's go ahead and try this chocolate bar. It's 72% cacao, which I believe qualifies it as a dark chocolate. You have the tricolor or tricolor of France right there, as well as one of the national symbols of France, which is a chicken, or should I say a rooster. The ingredients seem to be only in French, but I can see some things like cacao, sugar, that's probably cocoa butter, and some other things like that. But let's go ahead and, without any further ado, get right into this. Alright, here we go. It's already broken in half. I'm going to go ahead and break off a piece. It has some slight discoloration and blooming, but that's really nothing to be concerned about. It's pretty normal when chocolate is stored for so long. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and try this. I do quite like it. It's definitely a very dark chocolate. If you're the kind of person that only likes sweet milk chocolate, you probably really wouldn't like this. However, most European rations, in my experience, include dark chocolate, and I've always been pretty used to dark chocolate. I've never minded it too much myself. So for me, I quite like it. It definitely tastes like it's of pretty good quality, and looking at the back of the wrapper, it didn't look like there were terribly many ingredients, which is usually a good sign of quality, especially in chocolate. I've been told that the most pure chocolate only has 2 or 3 ingredients. I think it's a pretty good, pretty high quality piece of chocolate. But that's all we have for supper, and that does it for this ration. The French ration kind of has a reputation of being a gourmet ration, and I really have to say I can't disagree with that. There were a couple of things in the ration that I thought could use some improvement, that I thought were slightly bland, but honestly there was nothing that was actually bad in the ration. If I were told to modify the ration, probably the biggest thing that I would change is to swap out the isotonic beverages. And I think you'd be better off putting in a couple of like 250 milliliter German isotonic beverages or something like that. And one for the whole day is a little bit underwhelming too. With that being said, it is 500 milliliters, but still. The main courses were slightly bland for my taste, as I mentioned, but I don't know if I would change them per se. This does seem to be more of like a regional or a foreign kind of ration, in the sense that it's not what you would think of as typical French food. I believe this is more like Middle Eastern inspired. So if this is the way, if this is more authentic Middle Eastern cuisine, then I think I would just leave it the way it is. Just because it's not super flavorful or packing a bunch of seasoning, I don't think necessarily means there's something wrong with it per se. It's not entirely to my taste, but I think there are a lot of people who would like it and especially would appreciate it being more toned down. I also think despite the individual meals being bland, it adds quite a lot of variety to the rations in general, because if one day you're eating more typical French cuisine, and the next day it's going to be something that's Middle Eastern or Asian inspired, that's going to really relieve a lot of the monotony if you're eating these rations for a longer period of time. I'm not exactly sure what the French policy on stuff like field kitchens are and how long you're supposed to be eating these, but from what I hear, monotony is a real challenge when you're eating rations for a while. So any kind of variety in cuisine and stuff like that would be really appreciated. So yeah, overall, it was just a really good ration. There's almost nothing to complain about. Like I said, the isotonic beverage I would change. I don't think it's very good, but practically everything else was good, and most of the stuff was honestly, in my opinion, just great. Alright, so that does it for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I most certainly can say that I did. There was plenty of things in here that I haven't tried before, and some of them were really different and really interesting. Definitely one of the better rations I've had. But if you've watched the video this long, I really appreciate it, and it really helps out with the channel. If you like the video, feel free to give it a like as well as a comment, perhaps with some ideas for a next ration to try. If you didn't like the video, as always, feel free to give it a dislike, as well as a comment with some constructive criticism on why you didn't enjoy it. If you're interested in seeing videos of mine in the future, go ahead and hit the subscribe button as well as the bell notification button. That way you see all my new videos when they're released. I'm planning on doing a US MRE next, and I have some really interesting ideas for future foreign rations. I'm planning on doing a poll in the future. In fact, it'll probably be out by the time this video is released. So if you want to vote in that, go ahead and go to my channel and it'll be there in the community tab. I have a couple different ideas for a next ration to try that I think will be really interesting, so I'd like to hear some feedback on that. But thank you so much for watching the video and have a great day.